Something that you might want to give your application the ability to do is to not only accept the username in the case it was originally entered in, but also be able to accept, let's say someone has the caps lock on, you want to be able to accept that data as well. The other thing you might want to do is provide the ability to log in not only via email but also username. So that's what we're going to look at doing during this video. Now, to do that, I have a CakePHP application with the auth plugin, so the authentication plugin and the authorization plugin, and I've arrived at that by simply following the tutorials and examples in CakePHP documentation, but in my case I've omitted the articles and tags tables, and it's just a table which is a posts table and the users table, so it's a little bit simpler, but it's good enough for us to get some demonstration of what we're trying to do. So now let's get started. Now the first thing we might want to do is let's change our login, or get our application ready so that we can get it running. Let's have a look. So this is the skeleton. So I'm going to go bin cake migration status and see if everything's okay there, and it's not. And I've got a unable to connect to the open database file. So that's a warning that our data source configuration is not correct. Now I'm using SQLite, but I'm using a directory here to hold the SQLite database. But if I look in my cake root directory, I don't have that directory, so I'm just going to create it, and then if I try and run my migration status again, it's okay, then it's connecting to the database. So first thing I do is run the migrations to create the tables, and then I've got a seed, a couple of seeds here. With the user seed, it has some sample data and it's hashing a password into the database for a couple of users. Now once that's done, I can then start my development server up and connect to it in the web browser and hit the login, and it should be test at example 123, and it works. Now clearly we're heading for a situation where if there's a capitalized part of the email address, or we want to be able to log in with a username, that will all work. So let's start with doing the login page. So close everything, go down to templates, users login. Now I want to accept both email or username, so it's nice to name the field explicitly, so email or username. And once we do that, it then changes our label too, which makes it nice and obvious. Another thing just to keep in mind is that if it stays as the word email for the field name, it will have a type of email here. And if you've got an email type and it basically, as you can see here, it's a bit hidden there, but it's validated. It's asking for it, and I'll close that so you can see it. Yeah, so if you don't change it to something other than email, it will be validated, and you'll have to then specify in your field here, you might have to say, and you don't want it just to be email, you want to say type equals text, and then that will stop it being a validated email field as well. Okay, so we've done our change to our login. Let's go through all our other forms for our users, and I'm going to have a username field to enter data into our add a user. We're going to have a username to edit. Then in our index page, we want a username, and then we want to see the username in the index page, and for completeness we want to make our view have username as well. Now that's all well and good, but currently if I'll just close our browser here. I think it's hung a bit. Let's see. Alright, let's open that database again, and we can see in the database here that we don't have a username field. Now obviously I could just modify the table and create a field, but it's a lot better to use migration so that you've got a history of exactly what you've done at each step. So I'm going to create an add username to users table migration, and then I'm going to go and just flesh out this table users. Going to add a column. The column is called username, and then it's going to be a string field, and we want it to be nullable. So we just say null equals true, and we want a default. If nothing's passed in, we want it to be null. So we're not going to be insisting on there being an email address in that column. Once we've done that, we just call the update method to update the table, and then migrations, migrate, and that should be all we need to do to create our F5, and we can see we've got our username there. So we're nearly there. There is something that always seems to catch me out, at least, is forgetting to unguard the field and wondering why values that I put into forms don't stick. So what I'm doing now is just going into the user entity and adding to the accessible array the username field, and saying true. You're allowed to assign to it, and that will save frustrations later. So let's go now and log in. And why can't we log in? Well, we've changed the username field, or the email field, to email or username, and we need to tell the authentication about it. So I'm going to close all these currently open files, and then I'm going to open up src application. And if we scroll down until we see the get authentication service method, this is where we're going to make a number of changes. Now the one we want to change first off, this login form is a form, and so we want to change the login form to correctly match the field name on our page there. So if now I go like that, I've changed the field name, it then matches up nicely with the authentication service, and we can log in. Now the next thing we want to do is we want to be able to log in with either a username or a password. So we'll go back to our users table, we'll go edit, and we do need to be logged in, so we're redirecting back. Let's put in test in capitals and hit submit, and we now have a username here. And what we want to do when we log out, we want to be able to just log in with username. So to do that, we need to then go to our identifier. So this is our authenticator, this is an identifier, and we want to now specify it's not just the email field in the database, it's also the username field in the database that we want to check against to identify a user. So looking in our database, we've got email or username, and then if we browse the data, we've got test, or username is uppercase test. So let's see if this works. It does. So we've now given ourselves the ability to log in using a username or a password. Now let's look at the different case version, and it doesn't work. So we can't log in if we have the incorrect case. Now the next step is to get case insensitive resolution of names, or resolving the names using case insensitive lookup. So even if it's a lowercase test, we will find that user. So to do that, we've got this concept in the authentication plugin of a resolver. Now what a resolver does, it goes and looks at a data source to find a valid user and then returns that user for the authentication plugin to authenticate. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to create our own custom resolver. Now let's have a look for starters at the default resolver. Now at the moment it's not even specified, because the default, here we have authentication password lookup. It automatically uses this resolver here. It's an authentication.orm resolver. So if I was going to be explicit and specify it, I would put it like this, and that would be all I need to do. Or I could do a number of different ways, but that just is the simplest. So now what we're going to do is go find that ORM resolver in the authentication plugin, and we're going to extend it. So to find it, we go vendor authentication, CakePHP authentication src identifier resolver ORM resolver. So in here we see, under this resolver, we see that we've got a find method, and all it's doing is looking up in the database using the ORM. It's looking up a user in the database, and if it's got multiple users we're looking up or multiple fields, well then we basically look for those users using multiple fields. So in the documentation, if we look, it says the namespace they should reside under is this app identifier resolver, and they should implement this resolver interface. So let's create our own custom resolver. So I'm just going to go to src, and then we could do this by right clicking, but I'm just going to do it using the command line. I'm going to go make parent directories, so I'm going to identifier and then resolver. That was the namespace structure that they wanted. Now we're going to create a new file, and we're going to call it the case insensitive ORM resolver.php. So that's the name of our new custom resolver. We want to also make sure that we remember to put the namespace in there for it, and we can call it the same name as the file name. And then this time we're going to extend the current ORM resolver, the authentication resolver that we use, because that also implements the, what interface did it say? The resolver interface. So we've got that now nicely put together, and we're going to just override just this find method. So instead of having it pull in the find method from this default ORM resolver, we're going to make our own. Now here we can see we've got the editor is complaining about the method not being compatible, but if I just control full stop, it just gives me the option to pull in that array access, and it stops complaining. So now how do we swap over from our default resolver here to the case insensitive one? Well, we can do that simply by pulling in the new class and putting class at the end of it, and it now will use that to resolve the users instead of the default. Now what is it doing? So let's have a look. We're going to just dump and die, and we're going to dump and die two things so you can see what really is going on. We're going to look at the where clause, and then we're going to dump and die also the string output of our query. And what that's going to do when we go and have a attempt to log in, that will give us, I'll just hit the login button here, and notice what we've got. We've got, this is what it's looking up, saying the where options or the where conditions are where the user email or username is test.example. And then that equates to this SQL, that's what be running. Now, one thing that I found useful, you might try it, it might be too cumbersome, but what I do like to do is when I'm having trouble with getting things working, is I'll often go back and say, oh, okay, well, let's see if we can just paste in stuff so that we make a query from what Cake's output and then run it and see if it works. And then we go, oh no, my format's good and that's good, I've done everything correctly, so I can then move on and basically be happy with what I've done. So that's really really handy when you're debugging your queries to dump them and just have a look at what's actually being requested from the database. And you can obviously do that if you go, let's comment this out, you can obviously do that again using, if we go reload, continue, you can look at the SQL log here and do the same thing in the debug kit. Just you can see what's been requested. So if we hit log out and then we hit log in, go to SQL and see what it's done. Sometimes if we go, I think it's history, if we go back one and then we have a look, yeah, so go back one in the history and then you can see that exact same query and then go into, paste it in here and then play with it until you get exactly what you want, and then you know, yeah, I've really hit the nail on the head as far as what I need. Alright, so where were we? We're at the point where we've overridden our default resolver and we've put in the case insensitive one, but it's not case insensitive yet. So here I'm just going to make a mistake that I did earlier, and this is what can cause problems if you don't think about the consequences of what you're doing. Just have a look. I've just changed this value. If we have a look what it's going to do, it's basically just saying where user emails like. Now that seems like, oh, it could work. Yeah, it might, but notice what happens when we play with the user input. So instead of putting test, I'll just put in the SQL wildcard character and hit login, and it's actually logged in because it's using that wildcard to put it in as an argument to the like SQL statement. So that's really not what we want. That would lead to dangerous things happening. So we then need to start to think, well, what's a safe, reasonably safe way to do it? So I'm going to just use lower, and then I'm going to say like that, and then I want to say, okay, so I'm going to go and then string to lower. So I'm going to make it lowercase on both sides and then do my query. Let's have a look at what it looks like. And log out and log in. And as you can see, I suppose I should have done example.com and never. And as you can see, it's lowercased. It's got a function, SQL function, and it's also lowercase what it's looking for, and so that will find the correct thing that it's looking for in the database. So now I'll just comment that out, go back and type in, we know that one of the usernames is uppercase test, so is it now case insensitive? And let's go again and go test, uppercase, go test2, doesn't work, uppercase test does, and then we go back to log out and we'll do example.com with uppercase and it works. So as you can see, this basically replacing the resolver with a custom ones allowed us to have a little bit more functionality with regard to case sensitivity in users or emails. Now I'm just going to click around the rest of my app here and let's add a new user and see if we can add a new user. We're going to call it admin at example and we'll make it right, admin at example. Now that's admin at example with a capital. Now we're going to log out and log back in as this user, but this time we're going to use lowercase, and so it definitely works. This little CakePHP application also had token-based authentication running on it. So if I go into my inspect, so this is from a while ago, but it basically had, so this is a post method, and if we look at the request headers, we see it's passing in an authentication token, and then it's allowing this user in using token authentication, and you can do that with get. So get the tokens embedded in the get request, and if we have a look there, it's a different user. So it's authenticating as two different users. If we have a look, test, if we view, we can't see the token. I think we can see the token in the database. And browse the data. Yeah, so there's our token, encrypted token. And yeah, so this little application has a few things that it does. Also looking at access denied redirects as well. So it might be worth having a look at if you're trying to figure out how to nicely say no to a user when they go to the wrong spot as well. Alright, so that has been how to enable case insensitive login via email or username. I hope it's useful to someone.